Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Think Clinical podcast. My name is Hamza. It's always great to be here. So we have received a lot of questions and a lot of feedback from everyone requesting for more insight into what the role of AI is like in the industry overall. And the healthcare industry has moved very quickly with AI since 2022, and a lot of healthcare facilities are beginning to buy into the idea of having AI systems in their administrative and their clinical workflow. So a lot of people have reached out and they've been asking, look, we've tried to get this out and we've tried to implement this in our facility or in our company, but sometimes rollout and adoption is just a problem. So even though I've actually talked about bits and pieces of what I'm going to talk about today in subsequent episodes, I will be going deeper into just how the implementation should look like when you start looking at AI solutions. And this is going to be a more in-depth conversation around how you go about your implementation process, what you should be thinking about, what you should strongly consider when you are doing this. So please stay tuned. This is going to be quite a longer video than I've always done, but let's get this going. So if you haven't done so already, please remember to subscribe, like, and share, and we'll get this thing going. So just to give you a bit of a background, so Peninsula Health in California implemented their AI-powered documentation system across all their 15 locations. Now, I've always said this and I've mentioned this in previous episodes. If you do AI implementation very well, the results are very staggering, and this wasn't a different situation, because when they did this, they noticed immediately a 47% reduction in after hours chatting, because the AI system was assisting with that. They were able to see about the 2.1 million in recovered revenue through just improved coding and accurate coding and all that. And they were also able to see physician satisfaction scores go up, because, as you know, one of the things that really weighs on physicians is, one, having to sit down after clinic hours to do all their chatting and do all their notes, and secondly, also being able to get the right codes in the system so that whatever procedures or whatever they did will be paid for. So their satisfaction scores just jumped from about 3.2, which was a score that was taken prior to the implementation of this system, to about 5. So now, what makes that story remarkable is that they almost failed completely in the third month of implementation. And that's why it's important for us to do a deep dive into how AI implementations, what you are doing right, what you do wrong, and what you need to be paying attention to. Because when you pilot an AI program, you are trying to scale beyond your beyond initial experiments. So I'm trying to walk you through how you should be looking at these things, how you should be considering these movements when it gets to that point. So now, there are certain things that we need to be very clear on. And the current landscape is that 85% of healthcare leaders have either considered or are in the process of some form of AI implementation in their system. 85%, which means it leaves only a small percentage of healthcare institutions or healthcare leaders that are not thinking in this AI-driven economy or AI-driven world. So what that says is that the capabilities of AI and the ROI when people implement AI cannot be discounted. So that is why it's important that, though people are moving strongly towards that, strongly in that direction, it's also important that they actually understand how this can be done properly. Otherwise, it becomes a huge financial failure. It becomes a pit where you just dump cash and nothing comes out of it. Then you just keep dumping into different AI projects. So you need to be getting this right. First of all, before you even think about implementing AI, you have to face the reality that there are certain misconceptions that are in the system, that are out there, that people will push back on just because these misconceptions have been ingrained in their mind about what the role of AI is supposed to be. And I've mentioned this before. One, you should be able to look at AI. So people misconceive AI as being that tool that replaces their job. But the reality of it is that AI, if used properly, is supposed to augment the human capabilities. It's supposed to expand your focus beyond what you naturally are, have the capacity to do or have the capability to do, right? So that's the first thing. That misconception has to be carefully managed when you are thinking about bringing out AI systems. Secondly, you need to move away from the mindset that everything should be implemented at once. Hospitals would probably report an ROI of maybe $3.2 for every $1 that they spend. But this is over a 14-month period. So you need to be very strategic in how you roll out your AI tools. First of all, you need to find out what, and I'm going to go into that details, but find out what you can start with easily and how you migrate into the bigger picture and how these will play with your already existing system. So you need to think about that. And the third thing is that a lot of people, which is a huge misconception, feel that AI is a plug-and-play system where once you implement it, it automatically makes your processes, it makes your systems more efficient, it makes your systems more intuitive. That is unfortunately not true. So having these misconceptions in mind, we also want to understand that the FDA since 2022 has authorized over 950 medical devices that use AI or machine learning, which means there's increasing confidence in the role of AI in the system. So even though these misconceptions exist, even though people have challenges implementing these AI systems, we need to be careful and we need to understand that with the increasing approval of devices that have AI, that are augmented by AI or powered by AI, it means it's becoming part of the healthcare system. So you cannot also move away or run away from that investment. You have to start looking at how you can strategically place yourself so that you become competitive. So now when you look at the average cost, right, of AI systems, there's a reduction in cost. Like there's a reduction in some of the things that you would have otherwise used that would have otherwise come out of inefficiencies or ineffectiveness. But this 35% reduction in expenses, which is the average usually seen, is over a period of 18 months. And mostly when you look at mid-sized to smaller hospital groups, you actually realize that these hospitals are actually saving between $2 to $2.4 million in that 18-month period. So what does this mean? When we look at this, it means that when you implement proper strategic systems over this period of time, you have to look at a project that would take anything between 12 months to 18 months and beyond. And because it's just after 18 months, if you do this correctly, that you start seeing all the profits. So let's look at this first. How does this strategic framework look? When we look at the strategic framework, first of all, you have to look at what you have and assess whether you're ready AI system. Not every organization has the infrastructure in place for AI. So the first thing you need to look at is your technical infrastructure. Can you access clean, structured data from your systems? If that is not happening, because AI is, when you put garbage into AI, you get garbage out. That's how AI works. So you cannot just put anything in there and expect to get, suddenly it cleans up everything that you never properly had in place. So you need to be sure, first of all, do we have clean, structured data in our system that the AI system can use or train on to be able to do what it does? Secondly, how well do your current systems communicate? So a lot of the time, without knowing, we implement so many systems in the healthcare or the hospital setting, such that when you finally start implementing, trying to get these tools in place, you realize all your systems work in silos. They don't communicate with each other. So if you need information from this system, you have to go back into that system to get that information in order to be able to serve a purpose in another system, right? So first of all, how well do your systems communicate with each other? You have to be very honest with yourself. And thirdly, what's your baseline comfort with technology? And if as an institution you are not heavily comfortable with the use of technology, you need to be very careful when you are moving into this terrain. So the first thing is that's all goes under technical infrastructure. How ready are you on that? Secondly, you need to look at your organizational readiness, which means how do you typically handle workflow changes? How do you manage that process? Who is in charge? Who takes care of all the little details that need to be ironed out before, and to make sure that this new system coming in is able to integrate seamlessly into your workflow? Who does that? Is there C-suite commitment beyond just budget approval? Because sometimes we think the only involvement that the C-suite has is to just approve the budget and they move on. But they have a more critical role in the long term to play in this. And the third thing is that what specific problems are you solving? Are you putting the AI, which is your solution, in, and later on identifying what the problem is? That's how you fail. You have to be very clear on what your challenge is or what your problem is as an organization first, before you go out there and find the AI tool or the system that will be able to help you fix that problem. A lot of the time people just implement AI systems because everybody else is doing it, and then now they are looking for the problem that the AI system is going to solve. Once you do that, you're already on the path of failure. Now, when we look at this, then we have to look at what we call the Goldilocks principle for the first projects. What does this mean? When you are choosing initial projects, you have to be sure that they are not too simple, because then it's going to limit the learning value of that project. So it doesn't have to be too simple, but it also doesn't have to be too complex. So that's sweet spot. That's the Goldilocks principle when this is your first time or you are now venturing into the AI space. When you have these in place, what does that mean? It means you have to find that sweet spot where your project doesn't limit the learning value of what you are trying to bring up, and also it's not too complex to increase your risk of failure. So for a hospital, one of the things you can think about is prioritizations. Can you automate prioritizations for common procedures or common things that usually will require prioritizations? That's easy. That's a sweet spot, right? If you can do clinical documentation, that's a sweet spot. Very specific for specific specialties. That is not too simple, obviously not too complex to implement, right? When you go into appointment scheduling and no-show prediction, these are very easy things that you can look at. So when you start, when you look at all your infrastructure, you look at your organizational readiness, you look at your technical infrastructure, you also need to now think about the Goldilocks principle, which has to be very clear. Find that sweet spot where the project you are starting with or the phase you are starting with is not too complex, but also not too simple. Now, the second phase of this is going to be the 3 to 8 month period, which is your pilot phase. Now, you have to be able to implement this on a pilot basis so that you're able to see whether or not it works or it doesn't work. What does this mean? We do what we call the 3-3-3 rule. The rule says that first 3 months, 3 months maximum duration, pilot duration, right? So once you start your pilot, the maximum duration for the pilot program should be 3 months. That's one. The second thing also, the second 3 talks about 3 specific measurable outcomes. So once you are going out and launching your pilot program, you need to have certain measurable outcomes that would determine whether or not this project is feasible, is helpful, is effective, is efficient. You need to be able to determine that. And the third thing is that you need to have at least 3 stakeholder groups that are actively involved. So you look at all the 3s in this principle. In 3 month maximum pilot program, you need to look at 3 specific measurable outcomes, and you also need to get 3 stakeholder groups who will be actively involved in this project. This is the only way you'll be able to test the full scope of whatever you are hoping to get done, and you should be able to get it done. Now, when we look at the pilot success framework, we are going to look at a couple of things. Before you launch the pilot, you need to look at what the pre-AI state looks like. You have to document your workflows. You have to look at the time investments for a lot of processes. You have to look at error rates. You have to look at cost to a granular level. You have to look at those. And that's how you launch this pilot. The second part of it is that you need to create parallel workflows. So which means you're running AI assisted workflows and traditional workflows, because you cannot just move away completely from the traditional workflows in the pilot phase. You have to be careful not to just discard everything that has been working over the period and go into the AI assisted workflow, because if that breaks, that's going to be a big problem. So you have to run those parallel systems. The third thing is you have to do a lot of weekly check-ins. You have to establish those weekly check-ins, and you have to get feedback, and you have to go back, and you have to plan, and you have to come back and do that. Okay. And you also have to plan for resistance, because people do not like change. So as soon as you start going into the spaces where people are held accountable, have to make some changes to what they're used to, you are going to get some resistance. So you need to prepare for that. So this is the pilot phase of it, which is usually within 3 to 8 months. So yeah, first of all, looking at your first 3 months as a time when you are looking at how ready you are for this. Then the second 3 to 8 months is when you're actually piloting this, and that's where you look at all the three the principle of threes, right? And then now you go to phase 3, which is where you are scaling and making movements. So that's between 9 to 18 months. Now we have what we call the ripple effect strategy, which is that instead of organizational wide rollout, you expand successful pilots to similar use cases. So if AI documentation works well, for instance, in cardiology, text it next in pulmonology, text it next in surgery before attempting emergency medicine, right? You look for very similar use cases, so that from cardiology, if you go to something like pulmonology, that's very close, right? So you look for that ripple effect. Don't just go organization-wide rollouts all at once. So this is the 9 to 18 months where you are now moving into specific areas and trying to see how it works. And now you have to look at some factors that would actually determine this. First of all, you need to be very careful in choosing people who would become what we call super users. These people know every single thing inside out about this program. They're able to help. They are the internal advocates for this program. They're able to help troubleshoot and everything else. Now you have to also look at workflow integration. How does this integrate with your workflow? You need to look at that too. And then you have to look at continuous training. That is very important. And the last is continuous optimization and management, which is after 18 months. So now you're looking at advanced metrics like clinical cognitive load reduction. You're trying to see how much that is impacting clinical cognitive load reduction. You also want to look at patient indicators and quality metrics. You want to look at staff retention. This is after the 18-month period, which is more of a continuous optimization phase of this project. These are the things that can guide you and that can help you implement your AI project. Now, in the second part of this podcast, I will be talking about what the practical implementation looks like. What are some of the staff training and buying strategies? We will look at all those ones in the second part of this episode. But for now, my name is Hamza Asuma. Always great to see you and talk to all of you. Continue to leave your comments, and I will see you in the next episode.